I think it's under threat. I really do.
Okay.
I think we have to be very concerned about that because I don't think we have balance of power any longer.
Okay.
I don't think we have the checks and balance system that you and I were raised to believe exists.
Right.
I think
It's one-sided or the
it's
other. isn't it?
very much so. We're so
It's a-
polarized we don't work things out anymore.
We
because
don't.
It's party before the people. And we have to go back to thinking about our people,
Right.
not our party.
Right.
And
Right.
we're so divided on that right now.
This has been a long time coming like this with the,
It has been.
you know, with the way campaigns have been carried on, and state legislators are sort of
Yes.
dividing up counties
Oh,
into
they
this
are.
thing, and the gerrymandering that's happened in so many different ways that now you've got a smaller group controlling everything. That's
You
not
sure do.
democracy, is
Well,
it?
no. And the whole gerrymandering thing is, again, that whole push where the party in power wants to stay in power.
Yes, they
So
do.
they're making it so groups that, even if they outnumber them, can't get control.
Right.
And it also goes back with voter suppression.
Right.
And we're seeing a lot of voter suppression.
We're right here in the
especially
state
right
where-
here in
right
the
in the
South,
state of
where
Georgia,
we've done
too, by
that,
the
and
way.
we said everybody's got to get their gold ID, so the gold star on their ID, so they can vote. And you know,
Yeah, the one thing I heard the other day on a news program was that if you signed your this time different than, and then say you had
Yes.
an initial, you left initial out,
it doesn't
they
count.
throw your ballot out.
Yeah,
right?
you know, that
I
kind
mean,
of thing.
come on.
And then also we're getting, so the talk is, because remember, this is a census year,
Right.
and we're seeing some suppression of true census taking, where you have some states that are putting no money into it because they don't want certain groups represented.
Yes.
They don't want them counted. Remember, your current administration tried to do this
Right.
by putting in a question on citizenship because they knew it would scare people and would keep them from identifying themselves.
So we don't get the actual fact.
We don't
of
want the
what
fact.
the numbers
and,
are.
And remember, it's extremely important we get an accurate count because that way
Yeah, it is.
people are represented. Where are the population shifts? Those people need to be represented.
The problem often is that, like it or not, there are lots of crayons in the crayon box.
Oh.
And your capacity to be able to color with as many of them as possible probably is more indicative of your capacity to have a balanced and well-lived life.
Okay.
Some of us may be lucky enough. I mean, there's even the story of the Buddha where his family tried to keep him completely free of any suffering, so he never left the palace, had everything he wanted, you know, and whatnot. So
Right.
that there's even in the myth or the story, the fable.
Kind of like
is
a
that
parenting style a little bit there for some, but
They
yeah,
gave him
yeah.
everything.
Right.
But still, suffering found a way to find him, you know. And I think, and the goal would be, how does one become better and better equipped to deal with the natural emotional contingencies that come with just life? And as
Okay.
you may know this, the feelings that you have when you're 18 can be different than the feelings you have when you're 50.
Mm-hmm.
And so it is an ever-changing landscape. And so it's never something we can completely solve because there's always something shifting, both broadly and narrowly. And so our goal is, how do we find a way to be able to live with the things that we're continually given? And a big chunk of that is some degree of suffering. And nothing could make you suffer more if you think you're supposed to be living the life you see in a truck commercial.
Right. Well, I was almost thinking of just about any commercial these days. When it's medicine, you have a terrible medical problem, but people are sort of bounding through the wheat field with the sun shining and everybody's happy and all the
If
models.
that's your
are-
idea of what life would be, you are going to be, at best, frustrated by what you're going to receive. At worst, devastated by the fact that it may be like that
It
in
didn't
some...
fix it.
Yeah, and it may be like that at moments. There are moments of pure joy and exultation that come from just, you know, there are. Who They're there.
Let's go with
But-
a couple of those. How about that? Well,
They
I think
usually involve drugs. I'm just saying.
well, the marketing problem I think we're coming up against that it's been painted at almost anything you're trying to sell on the television or any media platform. It's got all these wonderful, happy moments and people smiling and talking, and everything is happy in that regard, and you can sell more products. So we may be just victims of this commercialism, and as you've talked about earlier.
Well, how we may be victimized in ways, it may keep us further from the sort of skills and investment in our life that may be necessary for us to have some level of at least temporary contentment and to grow. Before I was going to bed last night, I was reading Roger Scruton. Anybody here a Roger Scruton fan?
No, sorry.
He was probably the foremost conservative thinker, certainly in philosophy and in a number of things. And as you know, I'm a commie lefty. But I've long ago
And
made.
we still let you in the studio.
Yes, good, yeah.
Okay.
But long ago, I said to myself, I can only be a comedy. That's a.
That was a good.
That's a Freudian slip.
There we go.
I could only be a commie lefty if at least 10% of the books I read had to be completely opposite of what I believe.
Okay.
And quickly I found that some of those made me want to jump out a window. But I found people like Scruton and folks like that who I may disagree with them, but they can articulate and they can challenge me to think in some ways. And so I've read a good bit of Scruton.
Oh, my
And,
friend, that is. I'm glad you had that balance there. But there are people who have never heard the opposite of their beliefs. They never heard any contradictions to the other side, and it seems to be in this. Dr. Hackett and I talked about earlier this notion of this have and have-nots and the differences and the political differences and the siding.
Well, they talk about the bubbles that we live in.
Right.
The other thing is this. So, all the data that we have collected
Yes.
about instruction and education shows that the efficacy of digital instruction, online instruction, which is where it was all headed about the time I retired.
Right.
It was hard to teach in person. You couldn't find a class to teach in. Nobody wanted to take an in-person class. So all the data was showing, hey, it's as effective or more effective. But I'm always suspicious of the whole data thing. As a educator from public schools, I always wanted to ask, well, what data are we collecting? And is
Right.
it really telling us what we need to know to make for a better life?
And how is it interpreted? That's
Yeah.
a big point of it. So there's data,
Yeah.
but then what do you do with it? What do you make of that, and how you apply it in the situation?
Well, and the ironic thing was I was an early adopter of online instruction. I was one of the very early ones at Columbus
Yes.
State. And
I
that-
actually have a video of you years ago on
Yeah.
a green screen in the old studio
yeah.
where you were talking about that. And I saw that not long ago. So
Well,
we have
we're-
some archives here that can track back. And when you say I did that, hey, I've got evidence you did that, by the way. So
Yeah,
that's
so
pretty cool.
so I was an early adopter. I thought this stuff was cool. It was fun to work with. I loved building websites and all that stuff. But as I did that, I always saw that as a side of what my real job was, which was to create new streams of knowledge as a researcher, and to go into the classroom and connect with students and do that and help people be better leaders. And now
Right.
I wonder, are we going to look back and say, we really dropped the ball, but all the data we were collecting told us this was all good, but maybe we didn't collect the right data, because now we have all these unanticipated consequences. People disconnected, two poles look at things politically. Now that you have everything out there on the internet, people look at the news and they go to the sites that reinforces what they already think.
Oh,
and
that's
there's no
right.
listening to anybody else. So
see
either
the show on confirmation bias. Just-
Well,
of that emotional dysregulation.
Sure.
We are going to be reflexive, we're going to be automatic, and we're going to make very quick decisions, and those may be helpful in the immediate moment, but long term they often are not helpful, maybe even dumb.
Right. It
Not
could very well be that
you know.
that you missed that therapeutic moment, and it won't be coming back anytime soon. Particularly if you use that approach more and more with anything that comes up that you have some issue with, then you kind of cut off the further exploration of it in lieu of getting out of the trouble moment you think you perceive, and doing it cut and dry. So there's not going to be much depth in the conversation over time.
And you could think of, there are all sorts of decisions that we make that are fraught with the possibility of affect dysregulation, that we can lose that self-reflective element, and so therefore we get into a bit of a pickle if we're not careful. When it comes to things like, and this applies to ethics, period.
Right.
All ethical guidelines are there for a reason. They're supposed to,
Right.
they're supposed to. In fact, one of the things that makes aspirational ethics is important is because sometimes if you outsource your ethics, then it makes it even easier to discard them.
Right.
You
You may
could
end up more trouble as
Right,
a
you could
result
say,
of those kinds
well, that's just what they wrote, that's what they want, as opposed to something that you begin to dance with. The act of bringing ethics into your bones is to turn ethics into morality.
Right.
It becomes an element of your moral compass.
Mm-hmm.
And so the person sitting across from you becomes someone with a heartbeat. And that can go back to erotic countertransference. It can often be difficult because if you suddenly feel an erotic connection, if you suddenly begin a level of attraction of the person across from you, you move to a place of splitting, and you lose their complexity. So part of what we have to navigate in a moment, and by the mere act of accepting the feelings that you have, then you can then dwell in complexity. And there's research to show this. There's research to show that that when we're able to, when we have a conflict over something, it can get us in trouble. When we allow ourselves to be, and that's the acceptance piece of that 3-stage process.
Mm-hmm.
It can be tough for new therapists or all of us to accept the fact that we have sadistic trends, that we might want to hurt somebody in some form or fashion, that we may invite our own hurt in some ways, that we can have erotic feelings. This can be really difficult with, and I do some consultation work with therapists in the community, but this can be really difficult if you're working with adolescents, because I've had therapists talk to me about erotic countertransference with adolescents. So if it's a male working with an adolescent female, and they're like, wow, what do I do? I'm not supposed to feel that.
Right.
I'm like, well, we have no control over what we feel. So, I think I was supposed to be incredibly wealthy and have a Lamborghini.
Right.
But, I woke up this morning and
A lot of things.
it's not there.
Didn't happen.
So we're going to have to start where you're at. And the goal would be able to think about that.
Right.
But notice
right.
how it's dangerous. This is someone underage, and I'm having
Right.
feelings in the presence with him.
Completely dangerous.
So how to
yes.
be able to say, well, what's going on here? What's going on here for you and them, and to be able to slow it down. And it takes the danger, and it becomes something an area that you can begin to operate in.
Right.
To be able to say, okay, this is this, and then you can move in a different way.
All right, where were we? We're saying that resolutions, people make them, they don't
Well,
continue. We
it-
just
it-
do that
It may set
for
up
some reason.
some counterproductive parameters in one's life. If
Okay.
nothing else, with the example of my wife, if you keep pushing off the thing that you're wanting to change, kicking the can down the road, that in itself is problematic.
Right.
But also, because we talk about some mental health stuff here, we talk about some,
Sure we do.
We talk about some psychoanalytic stuff every once in a
Yeah,
while.
absolutely.
So the idea is that all behavior exists in a context. So
Right.
with my wife's smokeless tobacco habit,
Wrong. Keep going.
the goal would be not necessarily that she should stop doing that,
Okay.
but maybe she would stop whatever is going on or address whatever is going on that makes her need that.
Okay.
It's there's a different switch,
Get to the cause of things. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So as opposed, because there used to be a thing we talk about in the literature a lot called symptom substitution. That if you removed if you just targeted the symptom, removed it, something else is going to show up.
Yeah. Is that still a thing now? Do we still talk
Well,
about that in
Research doesn't
graduate
narrate,
schools or-
because it was often used as a way to disparage behavior therapy and behavioral therapies.
Oh, that's right. The fight between psychoanalytic and behavior therapies.
Right.
Actually, a book. Wachtel wrote that book. That was a great book to read. But
I have
back in the
met
day.
and hung out with Wachtel.
Yeah.
I have, yeah. But he was a guy who thought that they could be merged.
Wrong, evidently.
Well, but
Well, maybe so. I mean, I not long this morning, as a matter of fact, I told a story about a therapy in a therapy situation with a couple who were very intellectual and gained a lot of insight and looked at things, but it was only the behavioral method that seemed to make a difference with them. So some kind of joining between those two things, maybe not a bad way to go.
well,
Sorry.
what may be helpful? It's interesting because people don't realize that the average number of sessions Freud saw someone was 4, and that we have at least several of his cases where at the time he used direct behavioral intervention. So the real world
Got it.
looks nothing like a book that someone wrote to
Right.
prop up a theoretical model. But,
All right, let's. We need to cut that out. That needs to be a clip
yeah.
right there.
So we all know that. We learned the hard way. In fact, I imagine anybody who comes from a strict theoretical model, the minute they hit the real world is like, okay, this is not the way.
This is-
regardless of what the model is.
I want to go back and say you didn't teach me what
There
we
was-
need to.
There's some things missing there.
That's good. That's knowledge, by the way. But maybe they should. Maybe they should zero in on how these things work together.
You have a story to tell. Columbus Podcasting can tell your story with a world-class video podcast of professional quality. Viewers and listeners can access podcasts anywhere, anytime. ColumbusPodcasting.com. Give us a call today.
All right, everybody. Welcome to Got Therapy. I'm Michael Baltimore, but look, special guest as And this is Dr. Jeff Conklin.
Good morning.
Along with
A man who was responsible for this at some point.
Yes, that's how I explain the world.
Really, it's
84% of the population is average or below.
Okay, there you go. He's on camera saying that. So
so 80. So, but how does this explain the world? How does this heuristic sort of organize the world for you? What does it do?
When you see people out there and they do something that's completely boneheaded, and you're going, "Oh my God, what am I?" Just think they're average. That's where they plug in. It's
Yeah,
like
and-
that's 84% of the world. They're right there.
there's quite a few of them too. It turns
there
out
are, yes.
if we look at those numbers.
I think I may be at this end of the
Some
of the-
days,
on the curve, so I don't know.
some mornings, right?
I might be on that end. Yeah, it's
All right, so guys, this is going to be fun. This Saturday morning, downtown Columbus, and what else is going on besides
Suddenly-
Got Therapy?
suddenly I had a craving for a corn dog. You ever get that just sort of a sudden urge for a corn dog?
Never for a corn dog.
You want the truth? Yes. I'm sorry, I had to say.
and you
that.
don't eat meat. How can you eat a corn dog?
Morning
they've
Star
got
makes
listen,
a
here
faux
we
corn
go.
dog.
I didn't know that.
I do faux corn dog.
Wow.
This is
Say,
there's
It's
no
funny,
telling. what it's
Because
made of.
I've always had an interest in carnival workers, and two of the folks that I know who work in carnivals smell like corn dogs.
Oh, they always smell like corn dogs.
So
It's like fast food workers, right?
it's, you can't. Where in fast food can you get a corn dog? What's a
I don't know.
I
don't
don't
think
know.
so.
I think
I
Sonic.
know. There's a new place called the Cookout.
Is it Sonic or is it Crystal? Has those little?
Oh, Sonic. Sonic probably
is-
got it,
yeah,
right?
okay,
Yeah.
yeah.
And Cookout out by the mall. Do
they have corn dogs?
Oh, they've got everything
Oh, I
that
didn't
you
know that.
shouldn't eat. They've
Yeah,
got it
well,
all out there.
They have
so-
onion rings. That's what's important.
Yeah, well, now that's a different story, not connected to the corn dog. But
that's onion rings are sort of the kink food of fast food. It's not it's, people don't like talking about it.
I don't know.
But they like them. They
Yes.
just don't
Yeah,
know.
nothing wrong with us.
It's 84% of
onion
people
rings.
like them. Okay.
In fact, I would think that probably fast food might hook a considerable number of the folks on that end.
Oh, I would
think-
believe that.
Yeah, I was wondering if you really had a problem with that statistic because after all, it's the bell-shaped curve, and there you go. You look at the numbers, you add them up, Jeff, right?
Every
So-
time.
Am I wrong?
It
But
comes
every
out.
time I see a bell-shaped curve, I find it oddly erotic. So am I the only one?
That's only you
Mama.
problem, no one else.
I don't know what that.
Okay, I could tell already. This is
Going
going
right
to go
down.
the tubes before we get this
Just
thing
saying.
started. But so I don't know. But it's great to have you in here, Jeff. How have you been doing, man?
I'm doing great. Great.
Yeah, I saw you yesterday.
Appreciate
we had
the
a little
invitation.
lunch.
Yeah, we did.
Well,
Yeah.
listen, you're invited anytime. I mean, I've invited hundreds and hundreds of people to come in
Most
to be
people would
with
know better.
and no one has
Most
taken it.
people
You're
are-
the second.
There we go.
Yeah.
So good luck to you in the next few minutes. Is what I'll say.
Right now, there's a homeless guy out there in the rain saying, "You know what? I think I'll stay in the rain." You know,
I could have been on the show.
could have been on.
Could be warm and dry. No, thank
I
you.
think I'll just choose.
Yeah, this
I'll
is,
choose pneumonia. It's not
I'll
really.
just sit
Above
here by
average.
the dumpster,
Above average and going. That's what he's doing. So I don't know what our topic is today. I thought I got a little bit of a text, but I wasn't sure where you wanted to go with this today. And by the way, hang on, Jeff. We're about to get started. So there you go.
All right.
Well, here's what I was thinking because I was listening to one of these. Ever listen to one of them podcasts? Podcasts.
Yeah, that's
I've heard them
kind of what we're doing here.
That's
But
right,
go
that's
ahead.
right.
once or twice.
That's what. So I was listening to a podcast, and I went several of them, and they were talking about the purpose of music, like what it does to us, what it does for us, and all that sort of stuff. And I'm a tad obsessed with music. That's why I was asking earlier about what kind of music you
Sure,
like, and I think
sure.
you'd said Boxcar Willie or.
No, Slim Whitman.
Slim
Not
Whitman.
many people will
Same
admit
category.
to that. You know?
I don't.
Okay.
I'm not sure.
That's okay.
I
Well,
apologize if I was setting you up for
Yeah,
the next
you
thing to
sure
come. but
were.
Yeah, evidently. So.
but that's okay. I actually like. I remember they used to sell a Ronco record of Boxcar Willie.
Did they?
Remember
Yeah.
it would come on late.
They were always late night, right?
The
He's the guy with a
put it in the roaster thing and it spins around and that guy?
Boxcar Willie was known for harmonica, wasn't he? He would play the train harmonica, woo, 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 the harmonica.
I don't know.
I think that's Boxcar Willie.
Sorry, I thought he was an authority.
That would make
on
sense with a name like
this thing, but-
Boxcar Willie doing the
think
train
he-
sounds.
They
know
make
that if
train
you have
sounds
all
and
the
harmonica.
connections.
That's
Come on.
all I remember.
But
So-
you're saying music has
so
a
I thought, and,
purpose, right? So let's
and
talk about
we
it.
all in this room like music, right?
Yes.
This is
Yeah,
so
yeah.
Pretty much.
and it might, and so maybe we could just open up some questions about like its purpose, maybe even to think of how it might organize our lives in some form or fashion, because maybe it has. Like if you were to think about the songs of your youth. What is the soundtrack for key developmental moments in your life?
Oh yeah,
Oh,
yeah,
wow.
that's right.
Right, there are, and that may allow us sort of to think about it as its utility. Maybe even there's like a couple of theoretical ways we can sort of think about music too that might be I thought could be helpful. But that's where I was at.
Well, yeah, it seems to me that it has a big impact on our lives. Probably more for some than others, but across the board it has some sort of impact. But if you're talking about developmental stages in our life, there was a certain group of sounds and music that was, sort of adjacent to those events in our lives, and it probably has some effect on how we recall those events. So when you think back to a certain time, there's a certain
Soundtrack?
collection of soundtrack with all the music.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
so you think that's true?
I do. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Like for instance, I don't know if you realize this, but one of the songs that I associate most with my wedding night, "The Wheels on the Bus Go Round and Round," just whenever I hear that song,
Wow.
Yeah.
Or the
okay.
wheels come off the bus is what I was kind of thinking, but I'm not sure. But
Train kept it rolling all night long.
yeah, that was an early
that's,
he got married young too. I'm thinking that's what that was.
I
But,
guess.
that was. Well, here's my question.
Arranged marriage. Right?
So, yeah, it was. There was
Another
some
problem.
There was some arrangements, all right.
Yeah.
There was a harness.
okay. Just don't go into details, please.
Here we go.
Come on, Jeff. See, I'm sorry I
Did I
invited you to
start
this
this?
thing, but here we go. This is
Here's
what
the
we
thing.
do.
So the first question would be like, so think about a song that you really liked. Like for many folks, right? You may have listened to music, but remember there was a time when you really when music sort of hit. Can you remember the time when like music became something you really sort of, really turned on to? And if you think of the songs that may have sort of occurred around that time, have you ever gone back and re-listened to them? Do they still have the same impact? Are they still important to you in the way that they may have been at that time?
Well, I'll jump in first,
Yeah,
Jeff.
yeah.
But the idea is that I think they do because it set up a marker at that particular time. And now on just about everywhere you go, they're playing the songs of the 60s. And it's everywhere. It's ubiquitous. It's in the grocery store. It's on everything. So there's almost a point that these songs we remember and we really liked, and there they are playing over and over again. Okay, we're tired of that now a little bit. But the idea is that, certain music from my background seems to be still played, used in commercials all over the place.
Well, and that's, I think, kind of sad. When a
sounds
song
like-
you really like is in a commercial now for
Right, right, 'cause
Glad
it can say-
bags or something like that. You're
Yeah,
just
it
going-
connects with
but,
people.
I remember I used to be a big oldies fan, 50s, 60s rock and roll.
Right, got
And
it.
then I owned a bar. And
Okay.
That's what we played was 50s and 60s rock and roll. And now I have a hard time listening to it.
It's like you've done it. You've been there.
and I burned out on it because we played it all the time.
So
but
just because it
I
was
mean,
over and over. Well, what would be a
every
50s song that would sort of like you would stand out, one that would really sort of hook you?
Oh gosh, some of the songs we used to listen to was like Tommy Edwards, "It's All in the Game," things like that.
Okay.
That was a good belly rubbing song you'd play and the dance floor would fill. Things
Belly
like that.
rubbing song.
Yeah, that's
close
that's,
dancing.
there we go.
Oh, okay. That's
Yeah,
it.
yeah.
Bellies rubbing together.
Yes,
I
sir.
get that.
Yeah,
Yes,
yeah. That's.
See, you're talking to a Freudian over here. So
I guess
we're about
so.
to
Yeah.
go-
Where are we going with this?
We can
No,
turn
but-
down that
See,
road.
and,
in a
when you
heartbeat.
when you have a dance floor in a bar and you want to get people out there, you'd play,
Yeah,
belly
the
rubbing
slow
music.
tune that
Yeah,
you're
so
going
they
to dance
get-
to,
yeah,
and
yeah.
people are on the floor, right?
And then,
Okay.
then I remember the Buddy Holly tunes, a lot of those. And
So really 50s.
well, and the thing about Buddy Holly is I have an older sister, and that was her music. And so that's what we'd listen to. And she taught me to slow dance to Tommy Edwards. So, yeah. That's, that's how I got influenced by that stuff. So
I'm not going to go Freudian on that. I'm not going
to. Somebody has to teach you how to slow dance. So if you date, you can do
Well, here's the thing. See, I grew up in an age when slow dance, because you're talking about the music because now I'm going to the grocery store and I'm hearing, I grew up in the late 70s, 80s. And so I've gone into the grocery store, and there's a band called the Pixies, for instance, that launched right about when I was about 18, 19, maybe a little older, but it was 87. So I guess I might have been 19. And I heard a Pixies song in the grocery store. And I'm thinking,
man.
I was just in the other day, and there was Steve Winwood playing.
Really?
Yeah.
What were they playing?
I've forgotten the tune now,
Ark
but
of
it was
the Diver.
from one of his. Well, they do play that
They
one.
do
I have
a lot,
heard
yes.
Ark of the Diver. Yeah, that's from a later album, but there were some earlier ones too. So it's just amazing that how this is still in this culture and still kind of in the atmosphere everywhere you go.
Sure.
I'm not sure the impact of that.
Well, some folks, like when you talk about burnout on certain sounds, like I can think of I probably really began to thinking about music, and I guess I was about in '78. I was 12, so maybe 13. 79. I remember starting to listen to music, and there were albums that my sister had sort of left. And one of the first that I really remember listening to a great deal of was the Moody Blues in Search of the Lost Chord.
Sure.
And so, and there was, I think it was maybe Styx Paradise Theater, I think. One of those early Styx albums.
Yeah, that's
and so
70s for sure.
When I go back and listen to the Moody Blues can hold up, but the Styx, I remember really being obsessed when I was a kid, but I go back and I'm a little cringy because you don't. I'm like, I do not. That's a little. That's a little much. So maybe maybe some of this loses its allure and luster. I don't know.
Maybe. Yeah.
I think so. But there's probably those go-to songs that we all have somewhere on our list now on our device, in the car, wherever you play music that still holds up over time. But now it's more of not just one song, but it's a collection or it's different groups.
Sure.
And so I've got a playlist now. Playlists were not a thing back in the day.
Well, there were
when I was coming
mixtapes.
up,
Mixtapes. Oh, yes.
I'm talking prior to mixtapes. There was nothing.
Yeah.
Because at one point, I think my first music was I got a record player.
Okay.
And it didn't have that many records. So there were 45s.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
With
Oh,
the
yeah.
spindle in the middle. And then there's the album when you're lucky enough to get an album.
And you'd save up and buy a 45 and, Beatles Day Tripper.
Yeah, and here in Columbus we had Flipside Records.
Oh, yes.
That you could find the most obscure albums out there, but they still had 45. So days gone by. I apologize. So we're getting too far back.
Well, I remember walking with my friend Mark to the Big K, because he lived in this bigger town. He was 14 miles, so he lived in a town that actually had, stores. And so I remember he and I would walk to the Big K, and he would look at 45s. Like he would looking for, and there would be a section of 45s, and they'd all be in the little sleeves, and you'd find, what.
And there was an A side and a B side on all 45s.
Yes.
There was the one recording you wanted, but then you had to tolerate this other.
Fill the other
came
side.
through, right?
Yes. Yeah. And now and then some band would put a good song on both sides.
Yeah, Beatles did that. As a matter of fact,
Beatles
sometimes,
did,
they had the number one hits of the B side.
Yes.
Right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
So-
a really good band would stretch on a B-side. You'd hear things you know. And it's funny because like I grew up in a time when punk had just hit, and so there was we were talking about my favorite band in the world a little while ago, Wire, and for a time, particularly in the underground and in indie, to be popular was to be bad.
Right.
So it goes back to your thing. If people liked it, it sucked.
Yeah.
If you made a lot of money, then which kind of went against being able to eat. But popularity was not. It was that was selling out.
That's right. That's right. You had to
So-
find the most obscure, revolt against the
Man.
the man.
The man always, yeah.
So that was,
yeah.
and I grew up in an era where the '60s was distrusted. So it was like hippies were the worst thing in the world. So like the lead singer of Sex Pistols they invited him to join the band because he had a T-shirt, and it was a Pink Floyd T-shirt that he just put in lipstick "I hate" over the band helmet. And so that's what got him the gig.
Right.
Because
outrageous.
you
You go
just-
against the
Yeah.
grain, right?
Which which was odd because of all Pink Floyd really weren't the kind of band that you could.
Say I hate them.
Yes, not really. And he probably didn't really hate them. He was just being a schmuck. But there were certain bands like for a while, if in Britain, the Beatles were often the target.
Oh, sure.
These bands that were sort of
progressed out of the pop into this. They're doing their own thing. They're doing something different, probably along that same line with the others you talked about.
They sort of helped usher in, Pink Floyd, bands like that. Psychedelia became something that, but in the '80s, particularly, like you mentioned records, but I came around the time when CDs became a thing, so records were out.
Right.
And I owned some records and cassettes for a while, and then CDs.
Yeah.
But
No 8 tracks. Anybody?
Jeez,
Anyone?
mine are
Okay,
gone
all
now.
right, sorry.
I had my 8 tracks. But
I
yeah.
apologize for being old, but
I remember an 8-track of an ABBA album called Voulez-Vous, I think, we had an 8-track, and there was a built-in 8-track player on that. We had one of those giant all-in-one wood, had a record player in it, an 8-track player,
Yes.
and then I remember that.
the huge consoles
Oh, yeah, it was
that you
a
had
console, yes.
middle,
Play,
Right.
I remember those. So those were good days, but obscurity was key. College radio was big. Like how you learned about things, where you turn on the college radio and it was 90.1, I think
Okay.
was at UT, and you could listen. You would sort of see it. You'd hear like band, and their motto was, if you've heard it before, we're not doing our job. And so it literally was just a
I want to hear that song again. No, we
don't-
You can't. You can't. We don't play
Short playlist.
What?
it's not,
All new.
and it would be like the most, like I remember there's a label out of New Zealand called Flying Nun. And for a while there, I don't know if you heard a lot of Lou Reed or Velvet Underground, but they said they had that sort of a jangly, lo-fi sort of sound to them, and there were all these bands coming off the Flying Nun label, and so you were, you'd try to find some, and you couldn't, you'd have to buy them on import. Like I remember going to a store in Knoxville, and you'd go to the import section because you wouldn't go to anywhere. Why would you go anywhere else? But you want to go to the import.
Okay.
And even at the time, like I've mentioned the band Wire, I bought one of their albums for $25, and this was like 1988.
That's a lot. That's a lot of money right there back in the day.
So it was a little like my whole paycheck from Long John Silver's just went into buying this.
Always wait for the reference,
Yes.
Jeff. Let me just say that it never happened, but still, it's a good reference.
great
right?
one,
All right,
yeah.
there we go.
And so I'm smelling like fried fish. I'm walking into the store, and I walk out with this thing. Another band called Bauhaus. They were like this. They were an early goth band, and I remember buying an import, their first album. Again, it was like $25, $30. Like you'd buy it, and then you'd go home and sort of you'd sort of like pulling the sword from the stone. You'd found this.
This is it.
And then you go home. You go back to your small southern town where everybody is even your mom does smokeless tobacco, and they're chasing a pig in the backyard.
Right.
Just another day.
Kill some chickens for dinner. Oh my goodness.
But
All
me,
right,
I'm
here we go.
different because I got this Bauhaus album. So in some ways, it sort of allowed you to sort of generate an identity and to
Right.
create a sense of self. And it's interesting we talk about this because you guys probably have a slightly different cultural reference to music in a way, right? Or am I wrong? Because you mentioned the 60s.
Yes.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
that was-
See, in my early days, of course, I was playing in bands because everybody played in the band. Everybody on the block, everybody on the next block, they all had a band.
Sure,
We put it
sure.
together and started playing the.
Unless you had a banjo where I'm from, you didn't play in a band.
That's right. No banjos.
Scary.
Yeah, remember the guy moved in with the electric guitar and the Fender amp, and that changed everything for us. Along the way, we were on bikes playing baseball until he showed up with this electric guitar. Right, it changed everything. I also remember that there were, we moved to the albums, and the albums kind of thing was. Is there one good song, or
Often that
all
was
the
the
rest
way,
of them are bad? All those kind of things is coming to mind now. But back in those times, we played the whole album side.
Sure.
So you got all of those songs in there. That's the way the turntables were set up. You didn't just play this one song.
No.
Like now, when you have a playlist, you play your song, those kind of things. But anyway, I just have to mention that. But yeah, so it was a different time, played in a band, played the music that was on the radio, and then progressed from there. So you had to keep up, because if you were playing in clubs or you played for money, you played where you go where the money was. So
You cranked up some Boxcar Willie. That's
we
really
did
what
not.
you
we
did.
did not play Boxcar Willie, but
Hang on, Sloopy.
everything.
That's
That's
what
what every
As
band
a matter of fact,
did. So
how
did
did
we.
you know it was
We were a
on the list?
garage band that did that too. Yeah.
Yeah, so
Everybody-
you progressed it. So that culture was, informed us, and we were kind of connected to what was playing and what was popular in a way.
Okay.
So that wasn't always the best music, but it's what people wanted to hear. So that's and also what we could play. By the way, listen.
So think about it. Your trajectory seems to be being in bands. It was a communal activity. It was sort of within a larger cultural context. Post 60s, when disco hit, for instance, suddenly that communal element and the hedonistic element was cranked up. And then I think that there were, particularly in Great Britain, where there was the economic crash and there were all these folks out of work, and the music that sort of spawned punk was sort of in your face, anti-collective in all sorts of ways, and this probably isn't for everybody because I'm an obsessive neurotic, but
All right.
there's a book called Our Band Could Save Your Life. And so there was this notion that you could find something very important in music and in the band and in the culture and the genre it was part of. So, for instance, when you bought an album, you didn't think of singles because it was like a novel. You listened to it, every bit of it, and you knew who did the cover art, who produced it, who you knew who influenced this band, so that you could sort of draw a tree and then begin to move backwards to be able to find things. And so it was like this. It was like, I remember the first time I'd ever heard Wire was I was at UT, and there was a guy who played in a band called C7 States, and he was a drummer. And he was
Okay.
and if you're from Tennessee, or
Right. I think I know that reference.
The reference, the side.
C7
Yeah.
States.
Side of the barns out there.
Yes.
So they're called C, and they were actually pretty good. And this is when REM really hit big. So there was this sudden bubbling in the underground, and so he had this great record collection. And so he loaned me 3 records. He loaned me Peter Murphy, who was the lead singer of Bauhaus solo album. He loaned me the Soft Boys, which was an underground. It was called Paisley Underground. It was sort of the '60s filtered through Syd Barrett area Pink Floyd from Great Britain. Robin Hitchcock went on to sort of keep doing things, but the Soft Boys existed. They were named for I think a William Burroughs reference, and then a Wire album. And so I remember taking them home, and you before you put them on, you look at the album cover, you turn it over.
It's the album cover.
Who did this? Where that you scrutinize the members of the band, and I think you and I talked about this before. That like I remember as a kid, when we first we used to have like 2.5 channels. First off, we're up in the mountains, and so you didn't get much. And one of those channels was just some guy blowing into a jug. That was all you got. And
Don't remember that channel, but
it was.
Didn't get that where I was.
Yes, Boxcar Willie would have been.
Boxcar would have been the top of the
Major
list.
improvement.
That would have been like, but if Boxcar really only played the jug. But I remember turning it was called Night Flight, and this was before MTV. So Night Flight came on, it played videos, and videos had already started to exist and whatnot. And
Okay.
I remember back to back they would play different things, and they played a Van Halen video. I think it was a live them playing the Kinks cover, "You Really Got Me" or whatever, and then they played the Talking Heads song, course, the same as it ever was. I'll think of the name of the song, but they played it, and I remember thinking to myself, "Good God, I am not David Lee Roth. I'm David Byrne."
Right.
Yeah. I am not.
Okay.
I'm not going to be that, and I don't really kind of wouldn't want to be that. But oh no, what do I do with this?
Right.
And that it became a way of self definition. It set the parameters of. And I assume I think this happens for all of us to a degree, right? Because you identified with a rock musician or maybe a sports somebody or whatever. But it began that process of identification. You begin to sort of, and maybe I'm wrong, but certainly in the 80s and underground culture and whatnot, music was this notion of this is how you could be true to yourself. This is how you could be part of a political movement or an artistic movement, and you could define yourself accordingly. And the Talking Heads were like that. Their early albums were filled with this neurotic energy and this sense, like if Van Halen were about the power of sexuality and this, exaggerating your sexual prowess and whatnot. The Talking Heads were about this sex stuff is scary. I mean, it was a whole different sort of like that. Why is my body doing this? And why are people expecting me to, it was a completely different sort of, and it couldn't possibly be popular. And Talking Heads at some point sort of began to have hits, but their first three or four albums were woefully obscure.
Right.
They were not, they were.
Well, I think too, as you were talking, I was thinking that it's a cultural thing because you sort of found the other people in your group that liked the same group or same albums and all of that.
Your tribe.
So it became
your
tribe.
Yeah. You could define your tribe. If somebody, like if you, I would even ask, what kind of music do you like? And that would allow me to determine if these are people I could trust.
Could I hang with them?
It's almost like a personality profile. Let me give you a list. That's
what do you listen to?
No, we don't like you because you're not with the Zeppelin crew. So that kind of thing.
And I was thinking about when Zeppelin first came out. I mean, not everybody was into Zeppelin.
No, it took a warming up to Zeppelin.
Yes, it did.
Did it? It really did.
That first album was great stuff. I mean, they went so far, but I think you made a great point, Dan, when those were the guys you hung with, the same people that liked the same, and like when Bowie came out, and we'd all hang around and
right. And I found in the group too that somebody would introduce a new group, and I would go, but then I had to if I'm going to fit in,
I better like this.
I've got to figure this thing out.
We're going to listen to this stuff. Yeah.
Right. And it turned out they were probably right. And I was just
you just had to get there.
Yeah.
Like when somebody introduced the washboard into that Jug Guys band. It was a while.
They weren't ready.
This is
point taken right there.
It was.
Yeah, so you've got to kind of fit into the group, and maybe your taste is going to change over a period of time with some things that are introduced. But that's what music was all about: is a new thing coming up. With the new thing, right?
But and think about how, in some ways, it sort of shepherds and ushers in the possibility of integrating parts of yourself. Not only is it social, but there's the sexual. There's all these sorts of things that you sort of, like you mentioned, Led Zeppelin. They in some ways helped, along with Black Sabbath, sort of gave birth to heavy metal. Mm-hmm. I mean, they were sort of taking the blues and exaggerating them in ways that what was it? I think it was Pete Townsend or Keith Moon gave them their name because he said he heard them play live or heard them on a show and said, "Man, this is going to sink like a lead balloon." And
okay, there we go for predictions, right?
But,
not always the case.
That might have been, he may have been joking, but they took that as a sign that
I think too that there's emotion that are connected with music, and it's sort of a feeling that you have connected to Well, not only the music itself, but the event that you're at or the situation.
You see
or
them in
maybe-
concert as opposed to at home. you know,
Right, right.
with
Right.
headphones on at 2 in the morning. As a teenager, that was sort of those headphone moments. You would sort of. I remember hearing.
right.
There's a band called the Jesus and Mary Chain, and their music sounds
Jeff,
a little.
did you just say yes? You have that collection? At
No,
home?
I don't have that
Okay,
collection,
all
but
right,
I
that was-
remember them. I remember them. Yes.
All right.
And it sounds a little like if you cross the Beach Boys with a chainsaw.
No, okay.
So-
that happens.
So there's these sort of like there are these sort of Beach Boy-esque, Beatle-esque melodies buried under just layers of feedback. It's like
Right,
It's like a
right, yeah.
it's and so there's a song they have called "You'll Never Understand Me." And I remember as a teenager listening to that. You're right. No
Sounds
one's
true.
ever going to
Sounds
understand me.
Nobody
That's
will.
right.
And it
And
was
that was the point, man.
It was like, and I saw them. I've seen them in concert a couple of times, and first time I saw them at in Knoxville, Tennessee, in 1990.
Okay.
And I guess I was.
There's a memory right
Yeah.
there for you. All right.
I guess I was 19 when I
Okay.
saw them, maybe 20, and so they come into the Knoxville Theater, and the opening band was Nine Inch Nails. And so it was
Yeah.
already a little raucous because the lead singer, Trent Reznor of Nine Inch Nails, grabbed the guitarist by the hair and started dragging him around the stage. And I was
Oh.
like, we are not in Kansas
We are,
anymore.
we're out there now.
But when the Jesus and Mary Chain came on, first off, before they came on, the whole venue filled with smoke. I'm like, what is this? And suddenly I noticed that they were turning all the lights like toward us. And so when they came on, well, first off, before they came on,
You were
they
blinded. You couldn't see,
well,
right? All right,
that was about to happen. They played a video of a song that I'd never heard from them, and they played it. I was like, why are they playing a video before they come on? And then the song goes off, smoke rolls in, and suddenly the lights start going in your eyes, so you can't see. You're being disoriented, and the band is just a wall of feedback. You can't tell when the next song begins or ends, and they don't speak. The lead singer sort of just draped over the and he's and it's just whatever, and they only play for like 30 minutes.
right.
and at one point I sort of just turn and see what everybody's doing, and everybody's got their mouths open. They're going, my God, what is this? And some people are scared.
Happening.
And then suddenly it stops, and somehow the smoke is gone, and they disappeared, and we all just sort of filed numbly out of the theater.
That was it.
What was
Concert
that?
over.
And then I remember, my girlfriend at the time, and she was like, "Oh, that was horrible. What was that?" And I thought to myself, that is the greatest
That's
thing
the greatest
I've ever seen. That was literally, it was like, wow, that was perfect.
That's yes. Okay.
And you knew she wasn't for you.
And she wasn't.
Yeah. That didn't
We were-
last long, did
Because
it?
my wife actually has seen them twice with me, and she's a Jesus and Mary Chain fan. So that is a there's a point there.
That's a compatibility factor.
Though I
there.
will
This
say
is not a
they
personality
seem
thing.
to have learned how to play instruments in the time
Since then.
time.
Yes, yes.
Or maybe because they're even though the feedback is still there is they're
They moved the guitars away from the speakers.
there
so
was.
that,
And when I say
something happened.
feedback, I mean ear piercing, not
Oh, yeah.
like this shrill, like a dentist drill.
Yeah.
That's what it sounds like. It sounds like if somebody amplified a
Would
dentist
you
drill.
repeat that, because my hearing is gone now because of all of that. So
It was-
yeah.
Holy.
Okay, that was a moment that changed things for you.
It was.
Evidently. All right.
Yeah,
So and you identified with that sort of genre of music.
Well, see, but that I think maybe because you guys play an instrument, I might look for something. And one way to define music is organized sound that generates the seeking of meaning. So. I say that because it is very broad. I spend lots of time listening to drones and ambient. And this morning I was listening to a band called Awetecker. And it's one of their songs they have one song that's 42 minutes, but 27 minutes of what sounds a little like somebody might have might have dropped their synthesizers in a bathtub. It's really not. There's no melody per se.
Right, of course.
There are repetitive things going on within it, and so I often seek out that, like,
Right.
if it is too melodic or too within the lines, I can often, unless it's something like I'm a huge Bob Dylan fan, but I find the feedback in his voice. Like there's there's a dentist drill in there. It's when he speaks, but it's, and lyrically too. I think there's also something that's of the dentist drill there too. But my guess is you guys might approach music differently. Like there might be.
Maybe so. But we started talking about the early introductions to the music that we listened to back in the day, and then the progression through this, and now we're here today. So you can have a really eclectic collection. I mean, you saw my playlist up there. I mean, everybody from classic to country to obscure to ambient stuff is there. I play some ambient music, those kind of things. So, but every once in a while, I like that melody and the verse and the chorus coming up, and it's repetitive and it sounds good, and maybe it makes an emotional connection in different ways, and we need various levels of that emotional reaction to music.
Well, I'm glad you mentioned that, because you get a chance to, because he's going to talk about emotions, and this is a good segue to the psychological elements of it. But I was going to ask you about, like, you may look for something slightly different in the organized sounds.
Well, and I have to go back to the music I was listening to was very pop, so I was thinking Cowsills. Bands like that, things that you don't even want to. And then
2 verses, a chorus, and a verse, and it's over.
And that was it. They were 3-minute songs and things of that nature. And then later, it was what we would call today old country. That was my high school years. Was listening to Buck Owens and Waylon and people like that.
Sure.
And I was really immersed in that. It was different than everybody else, because everybody else was getting into the heavy metal stuff at that point, and I was going country, and so it was different. But when you talk about that emotional part, I remember those periods in my life when you were listening to this, or you were dating her, and this, and it was the soundtracks of our lives.
Yeah, I mean,
and
that's kind of the phrase, isn't it? That we have that. So.
And one of the first real concerts I went to was Jethro Tull.
Yeah.
Back 72.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
And we just had missed the Stones. They had been there the week before,
Okay.
So it's one of those things.
You can probably go back and you can probably next week go find the Stones.
They're on the road again. Yes. Once again. Yeah.
Tull, not so much.
No, but he's trying.
I just the fact that there was he's thinking about starting Jethro. He's not sure about it, but because he came. Did he come here?
He was in Macon.
Macon.
Saw him in Macon when he came.
Yeah, because
back in the day, some 70s.
Well, no, but he came here like recently. Like he's touring with a symphony or
I think I've heard that.
Something like that.
I'm not sure.
And something, yeah. But when we talk about it, because we should talk about some mental health sort of things, right?
That's why I was introducing the whole idea of emotions, because there's something called music therapy out there. I don't know if we want to go down that road, but certainly like that. So it does have an effect emotionally on us.
There's this guy. Ever heard of Jacques Panksepp?
No. Can't say that I have.
Never hung out with this guy.
No.
Okay.
Jeff, sometimes I wonder if he's making up these names he brings in here.
They're so far out.
I know I'm not going to know this, right? So he's free to do that.
I think he won a Nobel Prize. I'm not
okay.
sure.
Well, in that case, I look like I don't know
here
what
we
I'm
sit.
talking about. Apologize once again. Here we go.
But it's okay. I think he's one of the he's the first person to come up with what's known as the bottom-up version of neurology, that the idea that emotions come first and then thinking after them. And he's one of the guys who generated the idea of affective neuroscience. And so it's sort of, and his claim to fame is he's known as the rat tickler. If you go on YouTube, you can see this.
Okay.
And
there you go. Got a lot of hits on YouTube there, right? Okay,
well,
here we go.
He found out that rats laugh.
If you tickle them.
we don't hear it because it's high pitched. But rats have emotions. They laugh, they cry. And so suddenly there's this notion that affect is central. And as we move down the phylogenetic spectrum, that we see its centrality there is a significant centrality to affect. So we thought, well, we could look at the brain, and we could look at the brain and the emotions, and he has 7 subsystems that are interacting, and I'm not going to remember them all. Maybe I will. Let's see if I can. It's seeking, rage, care, lust, fear, play. There's one more.
It's pretty good.
But
recall right there.
Yeah,
So get points.
Yeah, so, there's another one. But in a good example of the seeking system, ever had a dog?
Yeah.
Still do?
Dogs?
Yeah. Walked the dog this morning.
The seeking system of a dog. What is a dog? The first thing you do, it goes outside. Right?
Yeah.
That's that seeking system. So Panksepp says that in all mammals, at least, we have this, and that there is a neurological substrate. There are different parts of the brain that sort of go into this, and there are different parts. So there's seeking, right?
Mm-hmm.
All of us know rage.
Yep.
You guys are hanging out with me, so you don't know about lust.
Yep. Oh.
So
I agree too quickly, Jeff. I mean, I do that sometimes. It's for the
You're right on top of that.
punchline. I'm like, well, oh no, that's not it.
The setup.
but and notice how care and lust are actually different things.
Yeah.
So that nurturance and care, but anytime we're engaged in any activity, there's an overlap in these systems. So there's affect complexity.
Sure.
So there is, like I was, I think I mentioned this, and when I did this ethics presentation at St. Simon's. Ever been to the St. Simon's Islands?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, okay. So it's I'm there, and I walk out. I get there, and it's kind of cold and a little rainy, but there's a woman and a dog on the beach, and she's throwing. And I say to myself, as I'm watching this, how many of Panksepp's subsystems are currently at play in this moment?
Okay.
As one would do, right?
Okay. Yeah, always.
Well, now.
So, so think about all the things, just in playing with your dog. There's the seeking system of the dog, and probably the human being as well. There's play in both. Mm-hmm. There's care and nurturance. Maybe lust, but I wasn't going to go there. But no, I'm kidding. It wasn't there.
Here we go.
It wasn't there. But I hope it wasn't there. But you can
I'm
think
not editing anything out.
You shouldn't. You shouldn't.
Right
I mean, it's a podcast.
It's not what we're going to do. It happened. All right. There we go.
So there are all these different subsets to play, right? So they're there and they're happening. And part of what we can think about is mental health is the capacity for subjective complexity, to have as much overlap and less conflict, because some folks, would have, and I'm going to go off the rail here, and you're probably not going to like this.
Okay, here we go.
But
Not
for
the first
instance, there was some studies Lou Borski, I think, did in the 70s and 80s about when women are breastfeeding, they inadvertently may experience some sexual sensation.
Mm-hmm. I've heard that. Yeah.
Right.
Okay.
There's probably don't Google this, because it'll take you to some websites you don't want to see.
Right.
Or you might want to see.
Or you might
and then
want-
you're down the rabbit hole. And the day's over. And
Yes.
Okay.
And there were lots of jokes there, but I'm editing.
Oh,
I'm editing.
good. Keep
I'm
going.
tapping the brake.
Keep going.
Inhibiting.
That's
He's
that's a
learning
good.
some more
We have to be
things.
able to inhibit and to be able to deal with these subsystems, but women who would have conflict around that could often engage. It would then engage different subsystems. Rage, for instance, annoyance, because they're experiencing something that they don't allow themselves to have some awareness and acceptance of, so they can move on from it. So our capacity to be able to move and to have this this complexity of affect experience is very important, right?
Sure.
And the reason I bring this whole thing up is that even though that with the woman playing with the dog both her and the dog are experiencing these, and in some ways these systems are being triggered by each other, and these often happen in any sort of social context. I think about this in terms of music. So I was sort of asking you guys, like, what do you look for in music?
Right.
And I think that we may get different things from, because you mentioned the playlist. So, for instance, a country song, and by the way, I don't know if you realize this, but now that there are self-driving cars, there's going to be a song about a truck leaving a guy in country music.
As it just goes off.
That's right.
Okay, it opens a lot of doors.
It does.
Driving
Start
thing.
writing this afternoon.
Great,
My
great.
truck left me and took the dog. So that's going to be.
And it has to be in the rain at the train station.
David Allen Coe comes back. Yes.
Got it.
So, but think about how different maybe it's like country might move. That there is it triggers the negative side of the care system of that care subsystem, or the blues, for instance. Like we these are songs that somehow are miserable but make us feel good in the act of listening to them, right? So they do something with these subsystems, and so music has the capacity, partly because its level of abstraction, even if it has lyrics. Most folks don't listen to lyrics. There was some recent study where they had people list their favorite songs and then see if they knew the lyrics. They didn't. Now that doesn't mean they don't register the lyrics. Just like you may not remember the things that your mom would say to you as she tucked you into bed, or you may not remember the things that your friends and word for word, the impact of those words can be registered. And again, this goes back to this notion of this bottom up. Doesn't mean that you have to be engaged lexically in these things to have some, but they're there. But so these songs, they different genre, like heavy metal, for instance, because you mentioned, and when you were listening to country when folks were listening, heavy metal probably might scratch different itches, may pull from different subs. For instance, you may not, while listening to a song about your truck leaving you, have the same experience about a song about Vikings, destroying a village. That would be Viking death metal if you like Amon Amarth. I don't know if you're into Swedish.
No.
All about Amon. Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
Got all the albums. I'm sorry. Too revealing. Okay.
That
there
is,
we go.
I was in a mosh pit in Amon Amarth, and someone knocked me down and took my T-shirt. That's a different
Wow.
story.
Wow.
But,
That's a full episode we got to come back to at some point. But otherwise,
they scratch. So your playlist, maybe the reason we make playlist is so that we can hit as many of those systems as possible. Maybe.
I think you're onto something there, because what? Okay, you've got a Pandora playlist or some other iTunes or Prime Music or Google, all those things. So what do you choose from that playlist at that moment in time? Okay, you scroll through, no. Creedence Clearwater, no. Amon Amarth, no. You keep going. Oh, country, George Jones from there. I'm a little sad today. I don't know.
I was thinking, now that you said, remember when you used to do those mixtapes for a girl?
Yes.
Yeah.
That's the only time I've ever done one. I remember the mixtape I made for this girl who was in my psychology class.
Okay.
And,
And what were you trying to do when you made that tape?
Well,
Not the ultimate goal. I don't mean that.
Impress the girl, probably.
Yes,
right?
but what were you doing?
One of those that would be both that may be both seeking and lust subsystems, right? So there are a couple of things, but there is an element of, and the way you described it was, for me, my mixtape in some way was an active display, just like male birds have the feathers.
Right.
Exactly.
It was an example.
This is me.
Yeah. My emotional. I remember I put a New Order, "Everything's Gone Green," which is an obscure. It's right after their lead singer killed themselves, and they became New Order. There's this remarkably depressing song. Which, by the way, if you've ever listened to Joy Division, the lead singer killed himself, and I remember they were interviewing one of the guitarists, like, we just didn't see that coming. I thought, you've been playing in the band, listening to this guy for years.
Yeah.
And you missed it all. You never heard it.
Were you listening to what this guy was saying?
No, they didn't listen to the lyrics either. But that's it, and that's what I was going for. When you were creating that tape, you were putting you out there. This is how I'm feeling. This is what
Yeah, it's sort of almost a resume in that moment for the other person to get to know who you are. Right?
And I didn't ever use the term display, but that's exactly what it was.
Right.
And isn't your list now on Pandora kind of the same way? This is me. This is who I am. This is what I'm feeling.
It should have been private until he pulled it up on the screen. There,
Mike's list.
Now I'm getting
listening to that.
psychoanalyzed.
There's a lot of Tiny Tim on this. I don't know. I'm not going
Tiptoe through the
that is
tulips
not
with me.
true.
Yes.
I'm not sure what that means.
One-hit wonders are on there. That's for sure.
Yeah, that's a problem.
Which is funny. Bob Dylan's a huge Tiny Tim fan. If you, he really is. But pre-war music, he's really recently his albums have been really informed by that. But so maybe then the mixtape is a little like the bird displaying its feathers in front of a mirror. Mm-hmm. Maybe there's something. It's sort of a display solipsism, and I wonder what itch that scratches. Because you're right. Nowadays, now that I'm married, I don't make. I will attempt to play a song for my wife, but if she doesn't like it, it hurts my feelings so much that I literally just stop.
Isn't that the truth?
Yeah,
Doesn't it?
Oh man!
Because again, you're doing the same thing.
You don't love me anymore.
But you're putting you out there again.
This is so
Yeah, look what I'm feeling here.
And she
Put everything on the line, right?
Right.
Okay.
Right.
Wow.
But it's so the mixtape. It is a reveal, a resume, a display, right? It is
This is how I'm feeling.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right. Well, I want to know how we control this a little bit, because I kind of think, okay, I've got the playlist. I'm going to go down. What am I feeling? What am I doing in this moment? What do I want in the background? That's too noisy. Let me put some ambient on, or let me find something. So it depends on what you're doing, what's going on with you in that moment. And I think that's beginning to sound a little like therapy, maybe. In some ways we need some comfort or something, drive, something. If you're exercising, for example, are you going to put on the slow dance tune? No, you're going to put on
something
the
that
one with the
pumps you up.
beat. Yeah, that's how you're going to do
But you can
this.
think about this, because therapy, there is a parallel. Great art introduces us to ourselves, right? Mm-hmm. It helps us to know and name parts of ourselves we otherwise couldn't reach. A good relationship does that. A good talk, a good encounter with anything, in some ways, brings more of us to us. Where Freud's famous statement, where it was, there I shall be. And it doesn't have to be it can be an unthought known. It doesn't have to be something that's articulated. You just know it. You can feel it. We would say, I think Panksepp would say, it's sort of much more right hemispheric. It's something that is pre-lexical or doesn't necessarily require sequential reasoning or words to be able to do something with it. And so much of therapy is that.
Right.
People, there's a real stress on cognitive behavioral therapy that's much more bottom down and, cognition. But good therapy has to find a way both, and maybe lean a little toward the part that's more emotion, and the part that I think all art scratches, right? Like
Yeah, and I'm thinking too that maybe we're looking for comfort. Maybe we're playing a playlist. We have it available to us. We're going back to that list. It becomes therapeutic because we're familiar with it. We're comfortable with it. It's not the new album that we just bought or the new thing we haven't heard yet, or somebody's turning you on to something in that way. It's like, okay, this is my list, and it brings me comfort, or it fits into whatever I'm doing at that moment.
Wouldn't that be the Panksepp's care subsystem, right? So you are looking for, because I often do go back to bands, and in fact, I think one time back in the old days, I made a list of all these bands I liked. Remember?
Yes, I remember that. I need to find that episode because that was really interesting. First of all, there were I don't know 200. I didn't know 198 of them. I've been listening to music for a long time, so
but
I had no idea.
I was literally walking across the street heading toward lunch, and on Thursday, and it's already I'd been at work since 4:30 that morning, so I was already tired, and I started thinking about the music I liked and the bands I liked, and I said, I suddenly feel better. I can think of my favorite bands. I like the Kinks. I like Wire. I like Autechre. I like John Coltrane. I'm going to, and as I'm feeling better, right? I'm like,
right. I think that's the effect, right?
But there's also music like there's that seeking subsystem.
I think, yeah.
And so there's music like, I've never heard this before, or like you said, I don't know if I really like this or not, but I'm going to keep listening.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
And how many times have you purchase something.
But you hate it at first.
And you hate it the first playthrough, and you go, "What the heck did I do?"
That's
And
a
then-
buyer's remorse or
Yes.
something that you
and
have
then,
to deal
you know,
with.
like third time through, you're going,
and then it hits you.
Yeah.
It's like, wait a minute.
this isn't bad. Now I know why I got this.
And it's, in fact, my favorite things. Like I remember the first, like, because I've been talking a lot about Wire. The first time I heard them, I was like, have they seen people play instruments before?
They know what
Do they know what that is?
I'm not sure, And then you start, and like you said, but there's something here, and then it's like suddenly you fall into it, like it finds you, and I think that's where that's a whole different sort of subsystem in a way.
And then part of that, I think, is you have an emotion right now and you can't identify it. And
Oh,
so
yeah.
when you play that, it really hits that nerve. It really strikes that chord, and you really go, yeah, that's what I'm feeling.
Yeah,
That's-
and
that's where
also
I'm at.
it kind of goes back to relationships too. So if you guys have a group and you're talking about them, I'm kind of processing that in real time. I'm thinking maybe I ought to give that a try, and it's connecting with something new, maybe one of those subsystems you're talking about, and then hey, I might like it too. So I've been introduced to something new. Let me kind of venture out, seek it, try to find something new that maybe turns out, hey, pretty cool. Sure, I'm glad I did that.
It was you were playing Slim Whitman, and I was thinking, but that maybe when I go home, I'll put on some Slim Whitman while I'm making. Because I bet my wife maybe right, but I would never have thought of, or Bruce Cockburn. I'm like, I really haven't listened to Bruce.
I haven't listened to Bruce in a long time.
I wonder if I revisited that, and let's see if there's something, So you're right, there is and that would be
connection.
That also triggers. So it does that. I like the idea that before I go to bed at night, I'll read and I'll listen to music, and the music I choose then is very different. Right?
Right.
It is. That's where I often choose an ambient track, or I'll
sure.
There's a jazz pianist named
No
Matthew
Lamont
Shipp.
Mirth before.
But there was a time when I was younger that I might put that on before I went to bed.
And sleep right into it.
Yeah, that's right. But nowadays I'm like, no,
No.
Can't do that.
life is cruel enough. I don't need to bring the cruelty to this moment.
Keep it going on.
Yeah, it's just not. I need this time for respite. But he's a pianist, Matthew Shipp, and he plays avant-garde jazz, and it often sounds like both of his hands are playing different songs,
Right.
and that they're angry at each other. but there's still something about it, like I'm like, I don't know why I would want to listen to this, but there's something sort of, and I can, and there is comfort in that, right? So
Yeah.
there are times, but there are also
Familiar.
times you might listen to music for. Like, I don't really know what I want to listen to, but I'll put this on, and then I'll find myself there, and it'll tell me something about, or I'll go, I want to remember. So each time we approach music, and it may activate different parts of ourselves, and it may articulate different parts of it. That's why I like this idea of sort of thinking about those 7 emotional subsystems, and how that's one way to sort of think about how we appreciate all art, but particularly music, because it can do so many things, right? It's not.
Yeah, I'm wondering too, and there's probably some science out there about how it impacts the brain. The brain mapping idea, and
They do functional MRIs. With people,
the MRIs, and what parts of the brain light up with certain types of music and those kind of things, and how we process it and what we do. And then I think that's almost the cognitive side of it, and you got the emotional side of it. So music covers a lot of territory for our lives.
Well, there was a recent study where they were showing letting people listen to death metal and whatnot, and the idea, does this make them violent? And then I forget what they did is they then exposed them to flowers or puppies and asked them what they felt, and it had the opposite effects of making them violent. Like,
Okay.
They got it out.
well, maybe that's it, because I can think of what friend of mine died a while back, and whenever I'm in a place of grief, I just can't listen to music, and so there was this blackout period, and then I'm at the gym, and I'm like, okay, I think it was down in my basement. I'm gonna listen to something, and for a while there, all I listened was the darkest, blackest, meanest death metal, black metal you can imagine.
Okay.
And
Okay.
often, there's a lyric where he said, "And the storm took everything, and the storm took nothing." And something about that lyric is this guy's like, in his Cookie Monster voice, saying it, and the music behind him sounds like, like it's just.
Yeah, yeah.
I found that as it brought me back into the world. I could find myself alive again and sort of thinking about grief, in ways that I couldn't. So it was reviving in a way, I guess.
Sure.
Yeah, I think there's got to be some. It makes sense. It has to make sense to us in our world, and so music can do a lot for us. I have it on all the time, basically. If I'm in the truck moving somewhere, if it's not a podcast or Jeff talking about something on the podcast, it's music in the background. Yeah. So
Once again.
you go to the gym, you're home, and you're kind of listening to things. So it's a constant in our world.
How about from the movie? I was thinking about the one with John Cusack when he talks about the 5 greatest breakup songs.
High Fidelity?
High Fidelity.
High Fidelity.
5 greatest breakup songs. And I
Right.
don't mean that as light as it sounds.
Right.
Because we do that. I was thinking when I ended my last relationship, I was playing music like that. And
Right,
I finally got to that point.
Right.
And it was like, okay, now I know what I have to do. Okay? And
And it helped. It helped articulate parts of yourself. You were able to have a relationship with the places that you hurt, right? Mm-hmm. It was literally therapeutic, right?
It was.
This was a necessary journey to get you to the next place you needed to be.
exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, there's so much to know and so much to learn about it, and there's such variety in all of these groups that we talked about here today. I mean, really A to Z. If you want to go back from the pop all the way up to
Right.
all the others that we mentioned here, there's just so much that impacts us and kicks in the cognition, kicks in the feelings with it, and we seem to just take it for granted in some ways. That
Well, you mentioned pop. Like, think of the greatest pop tune you can imagine. Think of the one that, like, really sort of, it doesn't have to be popular pop, but something that is. Can you think of one?
Red Rubber Ball. The Circle.
okay, all right, all
Pop?
right.
Okay.
All right,
Well, what do you-
I'm in a bind here.
Indian Lakes, Cowsills.
How about do it again? This is.
Paul Revere and the Raiders back
Oh,
from the days.
Kicks.
Okay.
Yeah, Kicks.
Kicks.
Oh,
I know.
Great song.
I know. Kicks are getting harder to find.
Yes, they are.
I know that one.
And they are.
Red Rubber Ball, I don't know, and the Cowsills I know a little bit of, but you're outside of my zone. But I'll look for it. But joy, right? This is just you could get it can give you goosebumps. The hairs on the back of your neck stand up, right? You can suddenly get this, and we think that part of the reason that we get goosebumps is that, our ancestors had fur, and part of the ways that we would display if we're under threat or whatever, if a cat, their hair goes up.
Right.
And so there's a direct connection between these emotional states of just suddenly being just, and music does that, right? You can have a song that just go to boom.
Yeah.
And
Oh yeah, I think so, and also it connects with a particular event. My Sharona, is that a thing?
My Sharona.
My
Yes.
Sharona, which
neck.
that was at a fair here in Columbus back when
was
the
it?
kid,
Yeah.
back in the day, and so that's the first one that popped up. But there's so many more out there that connects with a place and time.
listen
in
to the
your
lyrics of that
history.
song. That's a really dirty song. You ever listen to it?
Yes. Yes.
I don't no.
It is
That
really-
is what you quoted earlier. We don't listen to the lyrics, right?
We
That's
don't have. Yeah.
That's
So
all
the
I
music is
listen to
good.
often is the
What?
lyrics. From when I was young, I learned lyrics to songs, and all of a sudden the words would pop in my head, and that's all I, and
They'll come out like in conversation or
too often. Yeah.
but in that's another one of the subsystems that and there is we talk about this in therapy. Like if I'm talking with someone and a lyric comes into my mind, it often helps me to understand what's going on in this moment that I otherwise couldn't know.
Okay.
Like I remember I was I've used this example 1,000 times, but I was grading papers or tests or whatever out in front of this was before Davidson Schuster building was built, and and I'm doing, and suddenly there are people around me, and the Elvis Costello lyric, there's a song called "This Is Hell." This is hell, this is hell, hell is heaven in reverse. And why is that song in my head? And then I realized, wait a minute, these people are really annoying me. I really am. All this time I've been exerting all this energy, and people are like, this is hell. You know?
That's where I'm at. All right. So.
I need to do something about that. One of the lyrics in that is, "My favorite things plays again and again, but it's by Julie Andrews and not by John Coltrane."
There you go.
Yeah. You may not be able to control some of those lyrics that pop in your head. That kind of things. Well, man, this has been cool today to talk about music and hear your own experiences, and we get to share some things about it. What's the final word on music? Is there anything we can do from a mental health side? Is it comforting? Can I go listen to that song when I'm down, or how do I do? You
should engage as many activities as you can that'll help introduce you to yourself. That'll help you to integrate parts of yourself that can generate that complexity we talk about. You don't have to think about it intellectually. We've talked about music in a way that could preclude the possibility of some folks just enjoying it. It's enough to just do that.
Right,
but,
right. Without a big purpose. You started out by asking the question, what is the purpose of music? Mm-hmm. So do you have now?
Well, I like the idea that there's this notion by Schopenhauer, and he said that all great art must be useless. And there's also a lyric by Elvis Costello, "What shall we do? What shall we do with all this useless beauty?" Well, it needs to be useless because utility is only such a small fraction of what's asked of us in the world. If our job is to dig ditches, then it's certainly important that we dig the ditches we need to. But the rest of life is something else other than that. And I think art, beauty, all of it should be wonderfully useless. So it has utility. That's certainly important.
Okay.
But its utility is in its uselessness, I think. So.
Okay. All right. Rather profound in a way. Yeah. Play with and use all the crayons in the crayon box.
There you go.
I think we talked about. Jeff, good to have you here today,
well,
man.
you.
Thank you for being here. All right. With that, I guess we'll stop there and we'll see you next time. And I think in a way that's how technology works. It provides analytics. It provides data that you can then begin to measure and make changes in the product and make things better. Mm-hmm. So that I think is good. But back to your loaded question. Yes, almost everything new comes out of the chute. You got the early adopters. You've got hype. You've got trends. You've got people kind of reacting in different ways, good and bad. And then eventually, as progress moves along, things settle out. We get a more accurate picture of what's happened. So, unfortunately, Tom, you do not have a flying car that comes out of a suitcase like on the Jetsons. So I'm sorry about that.
My worry is that the whole idea that really what the business is in the United States is a software business. The majority of venture capitalism goes to 3 or 4 cities, and it goes all into software. Ultimately, what is being produced in the United States, because all the manufacturing's done overseas. Now, that may change as these other countries become more affluent, and then we may end up with manufacturing back here. But
I'm not sure all, but a lot. Yes, definitely.
Well, look at Columbus. I mean, what fed Columbus for years is gone, and essentially the jobs here are all in information. And as a college official, I always touted that. But in the back of my mind, I always worry if there's not a finished product that we can take to market and sell. It's kind of hard to sell concepts, and it doesn't create jobs for everyone. In other words, those folks who are in the information software business are going to have game in that area. So what happens to the rest of folks? That's a Harari idea that, well, they won't have anything to do. There won't be anything for them to do.
This Uma
Thurman.
Uma Thurman. She's
Yes.
doing that. She's the little girl with the climate change. Uma Thurman.
No, that's
No.
how it goes. All right, Jeff Conklin here today in the studio, ladies and gentlemen, and it's a big pleasure for me. I always enjoy my talks with Jeff. No telling where we're going to go in this conversation. Hey, but that's the thrill of the moment here. So welcome to Jeff and Talk with Jeff. So there you go.
Thank you, Mike. Thanks for having me in today.
Well, it's great, man. So what's been going on with you? Give me an update on you and what's going on in
An
your
update
world.
with me, just another day at work, hanging out. Had a good discussion with Greg Blaylock yesterday, Dr. Greg Blaylock.
Oh yeah, Greg. Okay.
We were talking about the influence of social media, and he was especially talking about it with his teenage daughter
right,
and how important it is. And he was thinking it's often like a diary for teenagers.
Really,
Yeah,
really.
where they can put in all their thoughts and feelings and all that stuff.
Oh yeah. That's a real interesting concept because I've thought of that over the years, basically in terms of how we built studios around, and we've done a lot of recording, and we're now using social media and kind of getting up to speed on that. And we're certainly on YouTube and cols.tv, our channel, and those kind of things. Got our apps out. So it led up to that, but when you go back, it was about recording and documenting what was going on.
Yes.
Not only with myself. I thought, well, I don't know how interesting that could be for anybody, but the fact that we need to document things, it seems like an important idea for all of us now, and I think maybe social media has jump started us into that idea. So what do you think about it? And tell me about that discussion.
Well, the discussion kind of changed as we were going along, and we were thinking more of social media as a way for people to have some affirmation of their existence.
Okay.
That, we're all that speck out there, and when the light winks off, we're just gone. But if we're out there and, somebody sends you a like, at least there's one person out there that knows you're there.
You validated in the world, right?
I put up my cat unrolling the toilet paper, and
right.
and nobody in the
those
world
some
thinks
things.
that as cute as I do. But I put that out there, or someone puts that out there,
Right.
and somebody gives you a like, or says, "Isn't that cute?" Affirmation.
It is a validation
Yes.
of
Existence.
existence, really.
Yeah.
Wow. Well, the thing goes. It sounds good to start with, but the thing goes awry a little bit when you know that billions of people are online and you're back to square one. Maybe, I don't know.
But they're doing it constantly. I mean, it's like the idea that you make dinner.
Right.
And you have to take a picture of it
Let's-
and put it out there and say, in my busy life, this is the only time my husband and I can sit down and have dinner together.
Okay.
And
Sounds
here
reasonable.
it is. And what you're saying is, see how important I am? I'm so busy all the time. I was able to take time out and do this. And again, trying to get someone to understand that you're out there and you're doing things, and what you're doing is important.
Well, it may be. All right. So let's take the other side of this. It may not be important that I know that you ate a meal, or you take a picture of your plate of
You're
food
right.
and you send it, and I go, Jeff, Okay, man. Do I need this in my world? But yeah, hit the like button. That's all you.
That's all you need to do.
That's what you're saying.
You never have to comment.
Hey, shut up and hit the like button.
Yes,
is that what we're doing
exactly.
here? All right,
that's
so
it.
something's wrong with that picture. Yeah, I think it is really interesting because I put up a lot of video out there in the world. And every time I look at statistics of how many millions and millions of video go up to, say, for YouTube,
Sure.
millions and millions every hour.
Yes.
Oh, my goodness. I mean, what? All right, so that's a lot of data. And where in the world is this thing going to end up? I mean, it's almost like I want to be recognized and validated, but when everybody does it, we're back to square one.
Well, we got to the point that he went on a 50-year-old man's rant and was saying, this is going to be the end.
Is this Greg?
Yes, and this is going to be the end of civilization.
All right, Greg.
This is where it's all going to end.
Tell Greg he's got to come in here because I want to hear that rant. I love rants.
And I said, the next thing we need is you out there saying, get off my lawn, you kids.
Yeah. I've actually used that one myself several times.
Or the whole notion of our fathers when they were in their 50s saying, it's the commies.
Yes,
They're gonna get, it's the Red Menace. It's the domino effect.
Okay, now you are an actual boomer. Welcome to the club. and I think what's happening is that you kind of it's a niche that you find yourself in, and. But I love the idea of he's ranting about something. I just don't know what he's actually ranting about.
Well, and my comment was, first I was the one that said, well, maybe it's just people trying to get someone to realize they're out there.
Right, which is a valid argument,
I
believe.
The other thing is people really don't understand the purpose of social media. And it's not for you and I to have our little diary out there electronically. It's really for some company to make a bundle off us.
Well, there's this whole commercial idea.
That's what it's about.
Yeah. So, I mean, if you really look at Facebook and what's behind it, they're selling ads.
That's it.
It sounded at the beginning like, you're gonna have your own group and your community, and you're gonna be out here with sending those pictures of your lunch or dinner and whatever that is, or your kid's soccer game or whatever that might be. But really, behind the scenes, I don't know if the average person knows this, but it is all about revenue and ad buy and how the companies do it and individuals starting companies and all of those things. That's really the bottom line of all of this.
Yes, and it goes just beyond that. It's who owns the information. I mean,
another huge issue.
Yes, and again, we could go into that whole conspiracy thing, and we could talk about how that's really what it's about. And who's going to have the wealth would be those, again, that have all the information.
See, you've jumped way ahead in the argument, which I think is fine. But the idea is that it starts out in a banal way with not a lot of backstory, where all you're doing is communicating with your friends and sharing.
Yes.
Share. What a great
what a wonderful
world.
thing.
No, you're absolutely right. They're collecting your data, your information, your buying habits, where you are, your geolocation.
Who your friends are, who you're connecting with.
They can then connect and bring those people in.
Yes.
You see the ad, say on the internet, you're interested in an item, you click on it, it shows up. You then shut it down, you go up, you pick up your phone. Wait a minute, that company's put an ad out there.
They sure
for
have.
You.
They sure have.
So I'm just I think people really have to catch on to what this is about.
And I think that we use it blindly. Most people use it blindly.
Yes,
they don't have a clue. Again, it's like you were saying, it's a little forum. It's our group. It's a way to communicate.
Right.
It's a way to document my thoughts.
Yes.
And it's not any of that touchy-feely stuff. And you've got to realize they're just using this. Oh, yeah, that is their product they're selling.
All right.
But there's a lot more that they're selling.
Yes, they are.
Yeah.
And when you talk about the data collection, we're talking about all sorts of data that you don't even know is being collected about you.
Yes.
And they're using it to sell you a product.
Always.
I mean, that's the general idea with this. the commercialism of everything, and that's the capitalism, as Dan Rose likes to talk about. Now it's the end of the world coming soon. He said you could kill off the world, but you can't kill off capitalism, is one of the things he said.
I can believe he'd say that.
I found really an interesting comment, maybe a Zizek comment or some sort.
Oh, yes, there we'd go again.
But tell me more, Greg. So how did this get started with Greg on his? It's kind of a rant about it because his daughter is on social media.
She's on TikTok. TikTok, excuse me.
That's quite all right, man.
And she's making, she's doing that every day, and on her downtime, that's what she's looking at.
Wow.
So being a good father, he decided he would see what she's viewing.
Yeah, let's check out what the kids are looking at.
Then it was at that point he began his discussion by saying, this is what's happening.
Well, you don't have control of all of that content and where the content may lead you, where it goes, because again, they're selling and it's advertising and trying to get more people in, trying to gather your data. For their use, and so privacy is not even considered anymore in a way. I thought we have to. I know a friend of mine who just bought a shredder now, and he's one of those that
way you can't put it back together.
You can't. There's no way to put this thing back together. This guy's not on the internet.
I can believe it.
He doesn't have the email.
He's off the grid.
He's off the grid.
I like that.
But he's got a shredder. He's so concerned about it.
I like that.
I
like that paranoia. I really do.
I knew you were going to go
like
for this.
That. Pay all your bills in cash.
Pay everything in cash.
Have little gold coins. Don't use the banks. You don't want any record.
Have you watched that episode of Got Therapy on Hey Boomer? Okay,
no, I have
you
not.
need to go back and see that.
I have not seen that one.
So, that's really interesting. But you have to be concerned about your kids and what they're looking at on the internet. I'm concerned about what I'm seeing on the internet.
Well, and you're saying that there was something just this week on NPR.
Right.
And they were talking about the disinformation campaign that's being ramped up by the Trump administration,
right,
as part of their re-election campaign,
right,
to discredit the mainstream media,
right,
and how they're really cranking it up now, and they've done it before,
right? Yes, they have, and evidently the Russians have really showed them the way, how to do it now,
and they're really taking it right out of their playbook. How you get out there and you set up the website. You set up the websites,
okay,
and you put information out there, and you see what kind of followers you get, and you keep pumping out these messages. And,
and if you've got the algorithms that will capture the data from connect with you around that issue or who you send it to, then they've got that person.
And once they've got that, they can tailor the next message.
Right.
And they can keep doing that. And they were saying that now's the time to really be aware, because you're going to start getting them on your phone.
Yes.
And you're going to start getting them on your emails and all the social media. And once you're out there and they get your information enough to connect with you, it will continue.
Yeah, it's almost like you can't turn the faucet off of all of that flow of information. And so the disinformation, the misinformation, there's a difference.
Yes, there is.
Take a look at that. But the idea that we're in this world where just about anything goes, pretty much. I mean, I guess our the morality, the laws, the truth, the rights, things we really consider important in our world, it's sort of being I don't know, it's been downgraded, if you want to use the technology term, to a point where it's just not. You have to be skeptical about everything, and people have to get a certain level of knowledge about this so that they can understand what is really true and what is not. So, I don't know.
And I think we have a real problem in this country when we discredit the mainstream, media. We really do. We get to the point we don't trust our newspapers, and of course, President Trump doesn't trust newspapers because they say things about him that are true. and he doesn't like that. And
Right,
he
right.
doesn't like the Washington Post. He doesn't like the New York Times. He doesn't like
Right.
We have that.
It's that retaliation that is we've just seen in the last couple of weeks.
Yes.
Here at this point in time, where if you disagree with him, he'll get you fired.
Right,
That's how it
and you
works.
can't fire the newspapers, so instead we're going to discredit them.
Right.
We're going to make them look like they're, and sometimes they may make a mistake on a story.
Sure.
And they will come out and say that. Well, that's all they need. They jump right on that. And
Right.
we can't forget, this is what the fascists did in Europe when
Right.
they took over. It's what the same thing they do in South and Central America.
Yes.
When the fascist governments come in and take over. And I think we have to be really
But I think
Concerned.
there's a lot of us concerned about these ideas, and the supporters don't see that from their
Oh,
point of
no,
view.
no.
And what I think happens is that it's a slow moving process. Although I have to admit now it's kind of fast. It's moving very
Really
fast,
fast,
and sped up to a certain extent. But hopefully people are going to respond to this, and otherwise we are losing our democracy to a
Yes.
certain extent, right?
Well, and I think that's a great point, because I feel some days we are. But what you have to remember is there is a whole group of people that get all of their news and all of their information from social media. So when they're getting all their information, their news that way, anybody can put anything up. It doesn't have to be true. And so we have this whole group of people that don't watch the news, don't listen to the radio, don't read newspapers. It's so much easier to go, well, so-and-so told me this, and so-and-so told me that. So I think we have to be concerned about that, Mike.
I think so, Jeff. Well, it's a bit depressing in a way
It is.
when we talk about
It
this.
is.
I mean, it really is, and I don't know if everybody sees it in that way. That's part of the problem. But if you get constant misinformation,
Mm-hmm.
you get constant active disinformation.
Yes.
To slander someone, as it encroaches on there, the people who disagree with you become the enemy. Mm-hmm. Now you've got a crowd saying, yes, they are the
They
enemy.
are, yeah.
And what happened to freedom of the press? What happened to those things that are important to our nation, our basic foundational building blocks of this nation?
Well, Blaylock also brought up something yesterday with this whole social media campaigns. And one of the things he was saying is, you see something out there that says, hey, I don't like black people. And somebody else goes, hey, I don't either. And he doesn't either. So that's okay now. Or it's okay not to like people that are different than we are. And so you have a whole group that now are being reinforced for their racist ideas.
Right.
They're saying, hey, I'm not the only one that believes this. We all believe this. And it's not
Right.
all of us.
No, it's not.
It's that group that they listen to. It's their, what is the term we used before? Their tribe.
Their tribe, yeah. I think the issue of the tribal nature of some of what we're seeing here is a degrading of our democracy.
Yes. Oh, yes.
And almost a disregard for empathy and understanding of another person. I mean,
Yes.
you can have
Oh.
a different opinion about something, but you shouldn't discount the person. That seems to be going way too far.
Now, you say that, and that's another news item I wanted to bring up. Just the other day, the Trump administration came out with their budget proposal for the next fiscal year. And one of the things they're looking at is taking away some of the benefits from people with disabilities.
Really?
And that was spoken about just today on NPR again. And what they're saying is $4 billion is wasted in disability payments. Well, you and I sit back and go, $4 billion, that's real money.
Right,
But if you
right.
look at the size of the budget for disabilities,
Right.
as they said, that's just a decimal dust. It's just 1% or less
Wow,
of the whole
okay.
budget. It's not even worth investigating, because we will spend more money than that trying to root it out. And a lot of it lies in the system itself and not in people trying to scam the system. It really lies in inefficient government programs. And it has nothing to do with the people. And the other thing that the administration saying is, if you can't speak English, you can be declared having a disability and you can collect. That's not true. But again, it goes with that same agenda.
Yeah, that's what
that
happened.
disinformation, that misinformation. Get that out there. Again, it's those dark-skinned people
Right.
that don't speak English. They're not like us.
It's not like us, and they use that in a way in a political campaign against other people that are different. And here's the other thing. I think it has this emotional undertone. It has the emotional impact that alarms people and gets people excited. And they're going to take away something, or they're going to do something that we don't like, and therefore that justifies the belief in that kind of thing when it comes on.
Well, I think it's even worse. They'll say, look at all these people that are sucking off the system. These people, there's really nothing wrong with them, and look at how much they're costing us, and that's your and my tax dollars, and we can't allow this to go on, so we have to stop this now. And that's what they're saying. This is people with disabilities, documented disabilities, that need this money to live.
It's insane a little bit. And what has happened with this disinformation is that you end up voting against your own beliefs and your own interests.
Sure.
I find that somewhat... it's hard to understand, really,
right.
when you vote against your own interest to follow someone because the group is following it.
Well, all they have to do is hit a couple of issues that have to do with fear. And when people are afraid, they'll give up their basic human rights just to feel safe.
Wow.
And I mean, we could pull
That's
out the
huge.
whole Maslow thing. I wish we could bring that up on the screen.
Right,
we could
right.
Look
We'll
at the whole needs hierarchy. And safety's one of the basic needs. So when people feel afraid, they'll give up everything. And again, it's the us against them. And we've come, so we have those two camps. And if you're not like me, then you're one of them. And that's what we're doing with people with disabilities. It reminds me a lot of what the Nazis did back over in Germany. One of the first groups of people that they rounded up were people with disabilities, because they weren't part of that super race.
Oh, is that right? Okay,
race.
yeah, that makes a point.
And the first group they did the experiments on were people with disabilities.
Right, because they could take advantage of them easily.
Because they're not people.
And they would not have the power to react and respond to that. That is horrible.
And if you don't see them as people, it's okay to do that. And that's why it was okay to put them in the ovens first, or put them in the gas chambers first. And this isn't a whole lot different when we attack people with disabilities, so we can give more tax breaks to the wealthy. But that's just my own comment on that.
Okay, there you go.
But the other thing you're talking about,
I hear you,
is we look at money for disabilities, and we call it an entitlement, because that has such a nasty connotation.
Well,
like,
that's exactly
people think they're entitled.
Disinformation.
Yes.
This idea of taking something and just casting aspersions on it, and then trying to make it evil and bad and terrible.
Yes.
And you can do that with just about anyone. And I think that's what's happening with the people in this campaign you were talking about a moment ago on social media, and how you're about to get bombarded with all of this. It's us against them, and you have to paint them as something terrible,
something bad,
awful, call them names.
Yes.
Like on kids on a playground. What in the world is going on here?
Well, and they're taking our money. But you have to be concerned about this, because other aspects of this budget is they're going to take away some Medicaid benefits, and the next thing they're talking is Medicare benefits, and cutting Social Security benefits.
Well,
because those are entitlements.
The Social Security, correct me if I'm wrong, but don't we pay into the Social Security?
We've been paying in since the day you started working, mister.
Okay, there you go.
And the other thing is, this is when you really have to support the AARP. And this is a pitch for them.
All right, let's go.
Because they're the ones that are lobbying for us to keep our Social Security benefits and to keep our Medicare. Because if they're not out there, nobody else is watching our backs.
Right.
And those have always been the third rail, as they call it.
Right.
The one you don't touch.
Right.
And
well,
so
now we may be getting closer to touching that third rail.
Because, again, we're talking a budget that they're proposing with $1 trillion debt. $1 trillion more spent than we're taking in. Because he wants to increase spending, of course, for the military-industrial complex.
Right.
And again, using the fear factor. And we want to cut more taxes off the wealthy.
Oh, the wealthy need these tax breaks,
you know, they do, because they need another boat. Or they need another car, or they need another jet. You know, those are expensive. You know, you can laugh, but it's expensive to keep my citation, okay?
Multiple jets. Come on. I think you're missing the point here. I mean, let's take a trip on one of my Learjets after the show. I'll show you the importance of having a Learjet.
And show me those people down below that are just stealing our money. But again, going back to the basic issue, we need to be concerned when they start calling Social Security and Medicare entitlements, because
I think you're right
it
about
paints
that.
it with an ugly brush, and you and I have been paying into both of those for many years.
Yes, entitlements.
You know? Yes.
That's that's an interesting phrase, because
Yes.
I think the idea that that people should not be helped in a time of need is basically against any kind of biblical point of view, that we should reach out and help the poor and help those. But no, now we've painted them in a way as become entitlements. We need to, pay more money into the industrial complex, as you said, but also that it taints them in a certain way. And actually, it's everybody who's working in the U.S. is paying into Social Security.
They certainly are. And the whole goal of that was to have that safety net for us when we were older, and we needed medical care, we needed money to live off, that kind of thing. And if you think about it, when you say entitled, it just sounds so dirty. It really does.
Well, that's
so that's why we paint it that way.
Well, it's the phrasing, and we really need to take a look at certain words that come across in these things and highlight them and pull them out and make a response to them, because it becomes normalized.
Yes,
and that's what I think is a big problem around this whole political atmosphere that we find ourselves in. The things that were highly objectionable now become normalized to the point where you can say whatever you want to about another person. It doesn't really matter anymore. That you can, and it comes at a time when we were kind of making some headway in that world to show respect for people.
Well, and you say that. Remember, you have a president right now who made fun of a reporter with a disability.
Right.
So again, we're shaming people that have a disability, and this all fits together. And you posed the question about taking care of people, and you used that in a biblical sense. But I also think as a society, what does it mean?
A civil thing.
What does it mean when you have a society? It means we take care of those that can't take care of themselves.
That's just the right thing to do, regardless of where the origin of that is. It's the right thing to do.
That's just what we're supposed to do. That means that we're a civil society, because we're taking care of the weak and we're taking care of the hungry and all of those people. But no, now we look at them as a burden. Just suckers on the system.
And it comes down to this idea of winners and losers, right? Mm-hmm. We're just painting everything in this black and white, 1 or 0.
Right.
Binary world.
Again, yeah.
So I'm good, they must be bad.
Sure.
I mean, how long is that going to last before people catch on? I mean, haven't they watched the sci-fi movies where the dictators and haves are in total chaos with the not haves or the have nots? And the idea is that we split ourselves and divide ourselves.
Sure.
And that's a big problem, and we know it.
But we like that. The government, a lot of people like that splintering of us into different camps. That way we don't get together and say, hey, this is wrong. We're being taken advantage of. But this way we're all fighting for scraps. And that's pretty much what we're seeing, is people fighting for scraps.
Well, what gets me sometimes too is the idea that the poorest people, the people who don't have the wealth, voting for the people who will take more of their money, their wealth away.
Yes.
They're voting, and they are supporting things that are not in their best interest. And it continues. It's mind-boggling to think that that's a point that we've reached.
Well, and it's like the wealthy are saying, "Hey, we're going to have a big party, and we'd really like you to be there with us, and you can come and come to our big party because
Right.
it's a big tent, and we're all going to be in it. But then when the party starts, you can stand outside the window and look in as we have our party.
That's right.
We don't want your kind at our party."
I think it's kind of interesting too that in this these political groups have sort of gotten walled off from the people. There's no counter argument or counter response in the group, so that everybody is thinking the same in the group.
Right.
Have you not? I mean. Have you not considered the consequences of everybody having the same ideas and believing whatever is given to them or put on the billboard or shouted at them in a rally of some sort? And you just want to go along to be along. I guess the idea of belonging is pretty important. You mentioned that earlier with Maslow.
Well, and the other thing we have to look at is nobody wants to stand up and say the emperor has no clothes.
Correct.
And that's that counter argument. Instead of saying, "Hey, wait," we all buy in, or the group buys.
The group buys in. Yeah. Yeah, there's some folks out there willing to take it on and stand up and be individuals and make up their mind based on the evidence and the information as opposed
Facts?
to. Oh, I'm sorry, you mentioned the F word.
The F word. Jeff dropped the F bomb this morning. He said facts. We
He
sure
said
wouldn't want to do
facts.
this.
That may be the title of this show right there.
Could be. I wouldn't mind that.
I'm a little. I'm just kind of wondering what happened to facts and information that is actually backed up with evidence. I mean, when did everything go awry? And now you can make up whatever you want to and sell it because going back to an earlier part of our conversation of social media, if I can blast it out there to everyone and get people, and some people will object to it, but others kind of take it in and yes, it must be right.
Must be true.
Yeah, and I'm going to spread it to my other friends so that they know
I'll put it out on social media and everybody will know. Well, the other thing about it, and we've learned this from the present regime, and that is, it may not be true, but if I say it enough times, people will believe it.
You know, if you just repeat yourself
Yes.
over and over, you're eventually going to get some people.
That are going to go, well, it must be right. Well, look what he's saying.
Well, now think of it now. So you, the guy shouting this, whatever that is, and you share it on social media. Well, then it gets picked up by your friends, and
Yes.
then their friends, and then the companies, and then the other people, and it goes viral. That's the term.
Yes,
And
yes.
wow, you covered a lot of ground, but you've influenced a lot of people with some bad ideas. I think there's a problem.
It reminds me of a cancer, the way it spreads like
All
that,
right,
you
all
know,
right.
because to use a term that has a negative connotation, that one works very well, but it's that same sort of thing. The other thing we see with the use of social media like that, and that is how quickly people jump on those ideas.
Right.
I mean, I
Right.
put it out there and you see it, and I mean, you can't send it out fast enough. And
Right.
by the end
Right.
of the day, it's out there. And your president likes to get out there and tweet something, whether it's true or not, and he'll put it out there, and that's his position. And then in 2 months,
My president?
In 2 months, he'll go back and say the exact opposite and say, "I never said that."
Exact-
And people never hold him accountable.
Oh,
they
no.
never say, "Come on, what's going on here?"
You-
How can you be on both sides of the street?
Well, you can't be on both sides of the street, and you can't have opposing ideas. I mean, there's this idea of holding disparate ideas together so that you can look at, weigh the evidence, think about it, come to a conclusion about that. In some cases, two different ways of looking at the same thing is correct.
Oh gosh,
really,
what a
but-
thought!
But the idea is that if you don't remember some history, if a person says this is the way it is, and a little later they say no, it's not like that, it's
Right.
like this,
I didn't say
and you
that.
don't remember that, and you don't go, wait, what's going on? You just you keep up with the new message
Today,
that it looks like it doesn't matter what happened in the past. So we're
Yes.
forgetting history at an alarming rate here, I think.
or revisionist history. We keep changing it to be
Revisionist
true.
history.
And again, going back to part of this argument is don't confuse me with the facts.
Yeah,
You
the
know,
facts
yeah,
are not as relevant because I
they don't
thought
go
it-
with my campaign.
Well, I thought it was a benign idea back when Kellyanne Conway brought up on the news alternative facts.
She is the scariest person when she says things like that.
It
there
is-
are no alternative facts. There's facts and there's facts. That's it.
All right, I need to get a close up on you when you're
When I'm ranting,
ranting on
you
this,
wanted a rant, and I didn't know we were going to go that way.
I love rants, but yeah. So and it's scary that I believe this because there's a certain amount of evidence and there's proof and I've got all this information, but you come along and say, not so fast, partner.
Yeah.
Here's another way to look at it, and mine is right. Wait, you can't be both. All right, so we're in a pickle, my friend. I don't know how we're going to come out of this. Has anybody got any positive ideas about
I
this?
don't have any on that. I would just like to go back to something we talked about a little earlier. We were talking about entitlements and Medicare and Medicaid.
Yeah,
And
man.
that leads me into one of my other topics for today, and that has to do with medical costs.
Really? Okay.
And
All right, hit
you
us.
and I both are well aware of such things as